Hello, everyone. Great to have Alison Sher back with us, author of the book The Social Contagion, Viral Ideologies and the Culture War for America's Future. And great to have Will Franco, Will I Am, Wilson with us.
Hello.
And he was just complimenting Allison on the book. What did you want to say, Will?
I was just letting Allison know that I had finished her book this weekend, and I was really taken on a journey through it. Honestly, it was not easy to read because it reminded me of how many challenging feelings that came up within me during those years from kind of 2020 when COVID started. It felt like that the sort of intensity of the culture war ramped up to a new level. And so yeah, reading it brought me back on a journey through all that. But it's inspiring in the sense of that courage needed to look at things neutrally and um, the hope of just that something will work out, even though uh, on its on its face, it was a really challenging situation. And I think your book addresses a lot of the challenges that the two poles of America and just the world in general have struggled with just through our collective history. So I was taken on a ride through it for sure. It brought up just the different ways in which my identity was challenged and affronted by the whole experience, and I think that that's really what a good novel or somebody who's poking questions at should do. So I was
That's what we're in right now, a good novel.
I suppose that's one way to take it. I mean,
That's one way to look at it.
well, if yeah, if life's the story, but
We're
I
in a
mean,
good story.
well, a good story has a challenge, right? And a
Hmm.
what do they call like the antagonist and protagonist? Except the problem is with humanity, I would think that it's not that we want any individual to be the protagonist or antagonist. It's more because I think you have a great line in here, Allison. I think it was at the end of one of your chapters, but you say something. It's like when humanity's pitted against itself, we're all bound to lose because you're making the point that, we're one human race. We're each other's families and nations and citizens. So, um, yeah, it sets up a good story. It's a challenge, but I'm here for it, and I'm curious about what solutions you two are thinking about.
Challenges are what allow us to grow, right? Grow, evolve, awaken, and our consciousness develop into greater levels of maturity. So yeah, we're here for the challenge. Well, let me just share my um inspiration around this and my intention and then turn over to Allison. So for me, I've been around a while and been in many different circles, and so I've gathered a lot of different friends from different locations and places on social media. And I was thinking about it, and I just kind of made the conscious choice, unlike most people. I mean, there's some extreme situations, but I would say 99.9% of the time, I don't block anybody for their opinion or their perspective or, what they share. And so I've been able to kind of just watch both sides and what they're sharing and what they're, how they view things. And first off, I would say generally the way of communication has gotten increasingly toxic and even now, unfortunately, violent, in certain cases, which we want to try to address that. But I think my feeling was like, well, maybe I can help because I kind of understand both sides, you know, and I think there's a higher order integration that's possible. So you have these natural um, binaries or these natural polarities. So, for example, you have masculine and feminine. You have are you open or are you closed, right? There's times to be open, but there's also times to be closed. You don't want to be open 24/7, but you don't want to be closed 24/7, right? There's times to try something new, to be progressive, to be innovative. There's also times maybe the traditional way is the best way. right? So it's like I think it's not just like, oh, this is what I am, and I identify as progressive or conservative or left or right or all these things. It's like I think it's more like a like in different situations, in different circumstances, a strategy could have an integration of both of these things. That is the way forward. And so that's kind of my opening to sharing. And I know Allison is someone who's been like exploring this and looking at this and like kind of like documenting this journey that we're on together. So it's awesome to have you here, Allison.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be back, Brian. I always love these combos.
Yeah. So what are you noticing? Like you've written the book, and then since you've written the book, like what are you seeing in the field, shall we say?
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is one of our mutual friends, Alicia Deva, sent me a article yesterday
Hmm.
saying that scientists have studied the brain activity of people
Hmm.
on the far left and the far right, and they're almost identical.
Nice.
So right, so that's something very interesting is that like regardless of whatever your affiliations might be, there's a similar there's like similar a similar cocktail firing in one's brain who for like people who gravitate towards extremism, right? And it doesn't necessarily matter, yeah, which side that's on.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing with this too, we got to talk about social media because I think social media to me is if it's not the biggest perpetrator, it's one of the biggest of creating the polarization because you the algorithm just reinforces whatever direction you're on and gives you more of that. So it's like if you're into like looking up pictures of cats, you're gonna open your YouTube or your Instagram and you're gonna see cats everywhere. You're like, oh, the whole world is cats, but the whole it's not cats. It's just what you're looking at because you've been looking at cats. And so we have this thing where it's like people are increasingly caught in their thought silo of like this is the way the world is because this is what I'm seeing on social media. Not to mention I block things that are not that on social media, so then I'm even more locked into my little world. And it's almost like you have to, which is actually, what I'll do at times. I'll intentionally look at the other side of an issue, intentionally explore what's the other sides, just to have a more holistic perspective of things. But I think it's harder with social media to do that. So I'm just curious what you guys see with the social media landscape.
I heard some I went to a talk and I heard someone say that
Mhm.
I think social media was sold to us as this democratization tool that was here to connect us to other people. But in reality, it's a mass civilizational behavior control tool that's used to divide us. So, with that said, if like Zuckerberg and all these big tech guys are essentially like funding our government, who's to say that all this is not, I don't mean to sound conspiratorial, but like it's intentional the way these algorithms are working because the culture war empowers the politicians ultimately, right? The division between us empowers the ruling class. So that was something that someone said, and they were even talking about the Arab Spring and how social media was used to essentially like spread that revolution in the Middle East. But like what if it was like the CIA like creating that revolution so we could install a new regime, or like I think there's so many different moving parts to what's going on here, and we just see cat photos and people who love and hate Trump, but that these tools are engineering our culture more so than we could ever imagine. And
Wilson?
for that it's like the most important thing we can do is like protect our mind.
Mm. I was really feeling that this weekend, Allison, because I don't know if you saw that OpenAI AI introduced its new video generator, Sora, and I really had that sense of like, wow, just protecting my own discernment, because that ability to tell whether something is true or not is even less and less just how I used to do it. I used to know what was true. I saw it with my own two eyes. Used to kind of be the bearer of truth. But now what one sees with their own two eyes may just be totally manipulated or generated or on purpose trying to enrage those parts of my brain you were mentioning, like the left extremists and the right extremists, where I'm like, all fired up. It seems to me that social media does have an aspect of purposefully inflaming those things, and because we don't really know the back end of it, so we don't know how the algorithm is pushing certain qualities of information to people. And that's a really powerful tool. I mean, if you decide to just channel a certain perspective and not show another perspective, you can really seem to chart a person's opinion on something. So I think it's extremely important to be discerning on social media these days, both what we, post to people and also what we receive
And on the internet
as
and
true.
internet in general, speaking of AI, I got an advertisement for an app, and this guy was talking, and then the same guy pops up like on the right side of the screen, and he's like, "That wasn't really me. That was an AI of me." And if you want an AI of you that says stuff for you, just download this app. And I was like, "Wow, that's where we're at now." Like it was the guy. It looks exactly like him talking, but it was, I guess, the AI having him say something that he didn't really say. So I think it's going to be, yeah, it's going to be more and more that direction. And it's going to be like, I was talking to my brother, and you almost think it would get to a point where you will just won't trust anything that comes through a screen anymore, right? Because you won't know, we might be a few years away from that, but you won't know like if it's real or not real.
Yeah, it could potentially put our national security, our collective kind of sense making at even more jeopardy.
Hmm.
Um, which is, I think that all came up during COVID, and I'm hoping to see, programs that are able to detect or have some sort of way that we can verify. Be,
But then it's like, who's the institutions that are verifying?
that's a good point.
Do we
That's a good point.
do we trust them? Maybe we do, but maybe we don't.
It's worth to ask, where they're coming from, what their head state is. Are they supporting the whole world, or are they in that kind of old world mentality of we're superior and that group's inferior, and so we have a motivation to make things, not objective. It's a challenging time because video evidence is also important for proving a case, If we were to dismiss all video evidence, it could change the world a lot. I hope there's more of a way of just discerning, being like, okay, this was actually, recorded, and there's a tool that verified that, like blue stamp on it, versus an AI video. I can kind of tell at this point, but
At this point, yeah, but it's getting almost by the week. It's like becoming more and more difficult
I
to
wonder what that
discern.
says about our consciousness as a whole, where we're headed, just that we're able to fabricate such real digital realities. It definitely feels like a turning point from kind of an agricultural society, an agrarian, when we went into the Industrial Revolution, that made sense because we had the mills and, things that were really physical and loud. But now we're shifting into a really profoundly digital and imaginative landscape. So uh, it's quite curious, and I think it's good to come together and just talk with your friends and ask them what is it that you're seeing, and because it's a lot to digest, or at least it appears that way to me. Um, just as a human, be like, wow, we're really going through some transformations as a culture and as a world. So. I just say that as a way of promoting empathy because it's a lot to take in.
Nice thoughts, Allison.
Ooh, well, Will came to my book launch party, and in there we were talking about how people are gathering information in this age of misinformation and deep fakes, and all these things that we're talking about where we don't trust the scientific journals, we don't trust the fact checkers. How are people doing this? And my next door neighbor, who's quite the academic, she's like, I have made a intentional effort to just go to libraries again.
Nice.
Because, like, think about it, before all this information was available, everyone had to go to a library, and therefore everyone had access to the same exact curated collection of information. And that's just not the case anymore. It's just like this unlimitedly vast universe of who knows what. But she's like going back into those texts and reading and getting the little Rolodex at the library and finding the book and all these things that are so lost of how we just used to research and how we used to explore what was going on in the world, like through information. So like in this age of AI coming on, which is going to bring things to a whole different exponential level of just indecipherability of what's true and what's not, kind of going back to the old ways. It takes a very, certain kind of person to do that. But I was thinking for my book, I'm like, my next outreach effort is to just go to libraries because I'm like, if I can get my book into libraries, it'll be there for decades.
Yep.
Like people will
I
be
love
able to
that.
for decades.
I would add in, speaking of going back to the old ways, I mean, I'm kind of being funny, but I'm actually being serious. Like actually talking to real people, actually talking to like human beings again. I feel like that's where I really get the sense of what's happening in the world. Like this kind of conversation. Like this is not edited. This is, we're not, it would be better if we were in physical space together. But besides that, this is the next best thing of like real time, real conversations. Like, what are you noticing? What are you seeing? What are you noticing? What are you seeing? And then you get a sense of like sense making. You get a sense of what's happening in the world by actually talking and having real conversations with people. So, because I think if you're just on social media, again, you can get really warped in like how you think the world is, as opposed to not having, if you start lacking the human interactions with real people and, having real conversations with people.
So another thing someone brought up was that we're pretend. I mean, maybe there's town halls still. I don't go to them. I don't know anyone who goes to them. I don't know if but there used to be throughout civilization like forums where people would come together and hash out these issues in the community, right? One on one, face to face. And in lack of that venue, an appropriate venue to like have these conversations that's like widely used, I think that humans go to meet that need via social media. And that's kind of like where we're all processing our collective storms and traumas and current events and things that are we're observing. But perhaps social media is a terrible place actually to have those kind of conversations because of the format to it, right? And because of the ways it can be manipulated and because there's a level of like anonymity
Mhm.
to it, so people can be very violent and cruel. And then there's also aspects of AI bots creating a bunch of social division online by like leaving racist comments on TikTok videos to make people think that the world is more hateful than it actually is, right? And this goes back to what I was talking about is like, what if these tools are actually being used to engineer culture war, physical war, division?
Yeah.
And I think we get a very also skewed reality of um yeah, just like how radicalized people actually are or not, right? It's like it radicalizes you.
Yeah.
And I used to feel like when I was younger, I was like, "Ooh, yeah, radical. Let's be radical." And now I'm like, "No, radicalism is dangerous." I'm like, "No, no radical, no radical."
It actually appears to me like that, like you talk a lot about what is good and what is evil in the book, and I actually really liked some of those deep questions, but to me, somebody trying to purposely lie to inflame division, that's like getting into evil, where you're like manipulating the goodness and peacefulness of the world to sort of inflame the idea that our divisiveness is bigger than our unity. And to the extent in which that grows and catches fire, you know, it's like we'll burn the whole world down in great fear. Whereas the opposite could also be true if we, like, that's the virtue of being a peacemaker and one that is intending to join what seems to be opposites together so we can recognize our common ground. Um, I think that that's so important that we, just highlight the need for that and also say if you're, purposely being, causing dissonance, then that's really not helpful to society. We just
But
poo-poo on you, go over to your own party and do that.
but I think that is what social media does. Because if you think of it like this, like what is the purpose of social media? If you just take any kind of conspiracy theories aside, the purpose of social media is just to keep you on as long as possible, right? I think everyone could agree to that, right? So that's their number one goal is to keep you on there as long as they possibly can. And
Mm.
so if you're just like chill and relaxed and it's like you're not it's not going to keep you there. But and you can even notice it in yourself like if something gets you like enraged or like really afraid or terrified and then you're like you're engaged in it there's a strong response, right, that keeps you in, and then you think you're a part of the war and you're trying to fight the other side and you have to keep this is I think probably X or Twitter is the biggest one for that where people are just all day they're like these warriors on there trying to fight people and um but yeah, I think that is the idea is the rage bait, something that really enrages people. It could be false, it could be true, it doesn't matter. But it's if it gets you enraged and it gets you engaged and it keeps you on there longer, then they're doing their job.
So would you argue that it's a helpful position to attempt to almost be equanimous and not be enraged? So it's like, how do you be passionate but not enraged,
Right.
involved but not?
That's a great question because that's one of the things I wanted to say too is I don't think it means like don't have a position or don't take a stand for something or don't have any feelings or emotions. But I think you guys would agree. You can tell me if you don't agree, but it's like, can you have um, feelings and can you have a position and can you have a stand while also seeing the humanity in someone else who has a different position than you do? And that's hard on social media. It's harder on social media.
Yeah, I think finding that humanity happens way better through the one-on-one
Mhm.
conversation than through a screen. But
Mhm.
in light of the fact that there's very few places for us to have those conversations unless we're like initiating them with random people who might see the world differently and like practicing deep listening,
Mhm.
practicing tolerance, practicing confronting our own cognitive dissonance, practicing having a very open mindset versus a crystallized one. Probably the majority of us are not going to be exposed to that unless we go out and seek it.
Yeah, I agree. So, so my blood brother, we've developed some different perspectives on things in the recent years. And I started doing this thing, we started doing it together, where we have a phone call every Wednesday morning now. And it's like 30 minutes or less. And we talk. Sometimes we just talk about like family or just whatever, sports or something, but we do talk about like politics sometimes or social, cultural issues sometimes. And it's actually interesting. Like it's actually interesting to hear a different perspective and then share your perspective. And sometimes I might learn something that I wasn't because I think the other thing is the media channels are so siloed that it's almost like two different universes, more and more. Like it's almost like you're in a different world than the person who's getting the other media sources. So it's almost I'm finding it's valuable just to hear like what are you being fed essentially like what's your media source telling you there's what my media source is telling me and then it's like you can kind of piece it together you're getting more of the full picture that way. Does that make sense? Like I almost think that everyone should do this. Everyone should have like some person they talk to that's like on the other side of them and like just, be able to talk and, you don't have to necessarily agree on everything, but it may broaden your view on things, or maybe you will learn something.
Right? Or you can just read my book and I did it all for you. Um, but yeah, totally. I mean, that was the whole like way I researched the book, was going about looking at the bipartisan analysis and really realizing it's like totally different interpretations of everything that's going on politically. And within that, I'm able to have compassion for people like who I feel like I'm like, you're living in a different world, but it's just as moralistic as the one I might believe I'm in. If I
I think that's the key, right? Is like the other, it's like they're both holding, there may be some exceptions, right? But generally speaking, both sides are holding part of the truth. And if you kind of put it together, you get more of the truth.
I totally agree with that just because the very notion of left implies right.
Nice.
So and people don't realize that that's Alan Watts talked about that in one of his books where he was highlighting that the concept of white, like entails the its opposite. So, and words do that too. Just by the fact we communicate like self and others, we're highlighting certain aspects of what is actually one thing. So to be able to just start to have that awareness, like definitely brings a greater unity potential because it's less of, just you're absolutely right, you're absolutely wrong. Though I do think there are certain positions that are morally more sound, like I don't want to murder tons of people in order to meet my ends or whatnot, or um, and it'd be interesting to go through that because a lot of um, America has some pretty strong, traditional kind of moralistic thinking, and I think a lot of those actually have to do with their Christian roots. And so what I find is a lot of the like deep divisiveness actually has to do with a number of Americans wanting to say, well, hey, we want to have our America, but without being pressured to identify totally as a Christian or be involved in uh, the Christian path to morality or correctness. Whereas the other side is like, it kind of has a very strong feeling that Christianity is a path towards morality and is actually the premise which has caused our great nation to flourish. And I actually had a conversation with a gentleman a couple of days ago that was one of those random pop-up, got into talk about politics where we didn't expect it. And I was able to learn a lot from that because I saw how much he grew up in an environment in the South where he was always feeling like the white kind of attitude was truly white supremacist. And so deep in his bones, he feels like we really need to shake this great evil of like any qualities of nationalism or um, that Christianity is like a supreme way. And if you're not aligning to that, then you're somehow kicked out of the American way or the good way. But that's you didn't touch on that too much, I don't think, Allison, in terms of in your book, but I see that as one of the deep, like kind of foundational levels for divisiveness in our country right now is and in some ways Donald, who you did talk about Trump a lot, but Donald represented that kind of like maybe Christian status quo or old way of like white man. Whereas there's a whole group of Americans wanting to say, hey, well, y'all don't just have the whole cake on it. We exist too. We have rights. We have a right to our voice and our relationship with the divine and how we express ourselves. And so I see a lot of kind of what is working out right now is those two energies coming into balance. I wonder if you guys have ideas about that, but I just see that all over. And it came up in the conversation that I had with this fellow white man, but he was strongly pulled to the left, mostly because of his challenging experiences with the Christian ideal growing up. And so that's just sort of an open-ended question, but I think America is struggling to redefine its identity outside of that. We were built as a Christian nation, and that developed our morals. And sort of like, well, how can we emerge as a or a national nation as one? Um, and I think it's really challenging. I actually think both sides have a lot of self-growth to do. So to get to that place to see clearly and embrace, life as a whole, as one, and um, but yeah, those are 2 cents on that thought. It's a big root of where these issues are coming from, I believe.
Humans tend to seek healing in the opposite of what we've experienced.
Hmm.
Like we think it's going to be found there.
Hmm.
Um, and then, we get into the opposite and then we start to balance out,
That's very true.
kind of like the fulcrum of how we are, right? We grow up and we're immersed in this thing and we're traumatized by it, or we see its failings, and so we're like,
Hmm.
okay, it must be, if it's not monogamy, it must be polyamory. But then you're
Right.
in polyamory, you're like, oh man, it's not polyamory either, and then to each their own, right? To each their own. But I think people attach to their ideas of like what is the right way to live, and then when we try to recruit people into it, right, we're like, oh, this worked for me, so like you should be a trad wife too, or like this worked for me, so like you should be a boss babe, or and then you start having like people selling courses on like how to teach you how to be a better boss babe, or whatever. And then it's all like, it's all, I see, like it's all people balancing out the like extremism in their own identities. Or
Mm,
it's okay, like for some people
right.
that might be their way, right? But we live in a country where we have more freedoms than other countries to have the liberty to live our own way. But when we start yeah, like crusading for others to live our way, then that's where things start to become polarized. And that's when you start to get the backlash and the resistance, and the people will be like, well, what about this? Um, and then another thing you mentioned, Will, around like America being a Christian nation, one larger thing that I've been seeing going on currently is that there seems to be a shifting world order that we are experiencing globally, where America, for the past however many years, has been the biggest superpower in the world. But in light of America's decline, there's other countries with other kind of, I guess you could say, potentially like strong man dictator type leaders that are gaining power on the global stage. And with those countries, like come competing ideologies from the Western way,
Hmm.
which we have crusaded as the most moral social contract that is like currently existing, is like our way of life. We also are a secular country, but I think people fear that with this rise in Christian nationalism, that like we could become, I don't think this will ever happen because of the Constitution, but like we could become a theocracy similar to Iran, similar to, like, I guess you could maybe say Israel. But what I do see on a larger scale is that the larger monotheistic religions are waging like political holy, there's like almost like a weird dance of like the political holy wars that are happening, and that Trump potentially, I mean, someone could poke holes on this theory, but Trump represents the Christian aspect of colonization, because these monotheistic religions have are colonizing in their doctrines, right? So it's like, it's very interesting. And of all the religions, of all the monotheistic religions, Christianity has the highest death toll.
Yeah, that's a big wound, that reminds me of America's original wound, just the colonization process that occurred in uh, uh like making this nation. Um yeah, so it's not pretty, and there's a lot of people who don't want to, yeah, be assimilated into that model. So a question arises for me is what is our worldview that is going to be able to accept all people. I don't know that we were capable of kind of seeing it before because to get to the other side of the world, you had to get on a ship, and it was unlikely that you would even make it to another country before you died. But like a worldview that is able to embrace and tolerate each other for just of our existence, like outside of any identity, religious or otherwise, just the fact that we all exist together is an interesting question, like when that will emerge and if it'll look like global communism, because I think a lot of people are afraid that like we could do that, we could try to make everything equal, but it would just be a too big of a um it might involve a really oppressive force in order to attempt to achieve that. But I'm excited to see
Well,
humanity
if you're
coming.
trying, I think I would say if you're trying to enforce that at all, it would be an oppressive force,
Right.
right?
I mean, and that's like trying to force anybody to do anything is against
Exactly.
natural
That's my
law,
point.
which is kind of like, I mean, it's different for maybe kids or something because I know kids can act out of their own best interests, and so that's a tricky thing. And it's ironic we have like a culture right now where we're advocating that kids know best, like even at age 8 and 10 for themselves. That was certainly not my experience growing up, that I did not know what was best for me and those around me at that age. But the yeah, if you natural law would be more of a you don't coerce people to do things, and I mean that's the best way to live is that you don't force things unnecessarily, and you kind of just let the apple fruit and fall from the tree at the right time, and these things is like a way of living that's a little bit I would argue less evil, if you will. If evil was like a need to coerce or change things or get in there and really manipulate stuff, um, then I'm looking for when that worldview will emerge that's more accepting of the fact that we're all here on this earth together and that we're all bound by similar laws.
So
We could
that's
call
like
that,
a shift in consciousness, I think is what you're pointing at.
yeah,
But
much like going from a conversation to being able to talk on the computer across like the country,
I
in a
just want to say that
second.
because it's different than because people have this idea of like we're going to change the world through politics, which I don't think that's how it's going to happen. I think it will be a shift in if there's this massive awakening, it's has to happen on the conscious level first, and then the governmental stuff, the politics stuff will just be the lagging expression of the shift in consciousness.
Totally. And I think that the tool of the internet is doing that. I mean, um, it's just an incredible tool to bring a global or a heightened awareness of where we are, how we're interacting. Um, I, I know you feel that, Brian. Allison, what part do you think that the internet has played in precipitating all this shift or really bringing about the I don't know, this global awakening or challenge or however you want to see it, but I see it as just paramount. It's just like, I don't know, a super important part of the technology is what is challenging us to look at all this stuff, and I think really bringing it up and just bringing it all up, which is it's challenging, but it's great, like you said, or like we started with. But
Yeah, that's an interesting question because I actually think the revolution that we're about to face, perhaps like the awakening or whatever, I actually think the next frontier of it is technological with the AI,
mhm.
right? Like that's going to shift consciousness and shift humanity, and some people are saying even down to our very DNA, right? Um,
Yeah.
right, like down to like creating like a hybrid race, right, between humans, organic matter and synthetic and technological. I mean,
Mm.
I think that is it's like it's beyond like the internet is incredible, but it's what we're about to see is going to be so far beyond. And with it's going to come so much innovation and a lot of problems being solved, but also like a lot of new problems being created. But that's just the way it goes.
You know, you're so right about that because it represents if the internet was the information age, like having a chatbot in your pocket is like getting a car or like taking on a rocket ship of it, because the amount of synthesized information, rather than just even doing your own research, is pretty incredible. And it's undeniable the power of it. I just had my father cheesing about ChatGPT, and I had to tell him, I was like, that's great, it's really great, but let's be aware too of the potential downsides of it, because yeah, I agree. I think that the chatbots and the learning models and the integration into our lives, it really represents like, because the old world was kind of, the hierarchy of the old world had a lot to do with who had certain information, knowledge, and power, and who didn't. And so I see like the technological crack is trying to divvy out that information and give it to all of us. Just like, you want the secrets to everything, like here it all is. Just ask your chatbot.
What's the guy's
And
name? The guy who's CEO of OpenAI, Sam Altman. That's what he said. I heard him say in an interview what you just said. He said it's distributing the information more equally.
and
So
to me, it's awesome, but that's also part of the challenge, because the reason that I, in retrospect, saw so much fighting about COVID and all this stuff is because it's like we were getting so much more information about ourselves that it's just changing the old structures. And even like all the kind of gender issues and all the fighting is, I think, just responding to the fact that we all have more information about ourselves. And hopefully essentially every individual is saying, I need to step up for myself. I need to, not take any shit from previous people or governments or prior programming or conditioning. I need to redefine myself as an individual, which is an incredible opportunity. It also, yeah, it's just feels like old worlds breaking apart as people challenge each other in new ways. But yeah, Sam Altman is uh, he's out there talking about a lot of that stuff, and that's, could that be a
So
bad
are
thing?
you
Is
guys,
that just a good
yeah,
thing?
that's my question for both of you. Are you guys saying that, well, I'll just go to the final endpoint. Are you guys saying that transhumanism is the answer?
Yes, but not as people are defining it. I
Ooh,
I say
ooh, Will.
transhumanism as like finding a transcendental part of our identity that's
Oh, come
already
on.
within us. So this is,
I'm not
you're
trying to be
already
poetic. I'm trying to be literal. Like the integration of the computer, the AI with the human biology.
okay, absolutely not.
Okay. That was a change.
Well, so I was like working in AI. I've gone to like a graduate school program for AI because as a writer, I feel like I can't avoid AI because I'm all my work is getting outsourced to AI. So,
Hmm.
um, there's a scientist named Ben Goertzel, and he talks about actually on Joe Rogan. He's talking about AGI and artificial
Does
general
he have
intelligence.
like wild hair?
He's like definitely like
He
yeah,
lives in Hong Kong.
yeah.
I've seen him, yeah.
So he talks about because people are like challenging him, he's really pushing to get to this point where there's a artificial super consciousness for humanity, right? And people are like, you're crazy, like could be so destructive. He was talking about how he sees it almost like as when someone invented the automobile, right? Like we didn't know how much the automobile was going to totally change the entire course of our civilization. There was going to be highways connected, and then like
Yeah.
everything that changed because one person invented this automobile. And yes, of course, with it came potentially climate change, uh, globalism, all these things from this one invention. But who are we to say that like humanity should have never gone there, and we should have just stayed like everything walkable, and like and then like everything would have stayed simple and closer to the earth, and we wouldn't have this whole industrialized society and all these things, right? So I do think we're at this precipice where these inventions are going to radically alter the human experience. And for better or for worse, I think it'll be both. But I don't think transhumanism is to answer your question, like I think it's like a scary thing, and biblically people are calling it like the mark of the beast. And with these kind of monotheistic holy wars that are waging on the planet right now, it's essentially like the doomsday philosophies inside of these texts, right? Because people really believe we're at the end point. Um, and I think a lot of people would like look towards this transhumanist movement like as the end point. Humans have evolved themselves to a place of extinction, and now there's like this new wave where our technologies are more powerful than us. And that, that was like the blip, that was the human story. Is that good or bad? Like, is that good or bad? I mean, some people might say like we deserve to be done now.
That's dark.
Like, right, like even though we're the most successful species on the planet, like maybe our time is done, and there's nothing that any of us can do to fight the tide that like species
Yeah.
evolve themselves to
Well, I
extinct.
think some of the Silicon Valley tech people do feel that way,
Yeah,
and maybe
that like
more
it's
people than
we're
that.
done. Yeah,
Yeah.
that we don't deserve to be here, and the technology is actually better than humans because humans
Yeah.
suck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know this term speciesism? Speciesism?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically it's like like whatever's best, just go with that. So if something comes that's better than the human being, don't be specious, don't be partial to your own species. Just allow the human species to dissipate and, go with the technology basically. I mean, there's more to it than that, but that's in this context of the conversation, that's the way I was thinking of it. Supposedly the guy from Google said that in a private conversation, the CEO.
Yeah,
I don't
which
I
is
just
scary.
Yeah.
that is scary. I was just gonna say I just saw this woman post a video. It almost seemed like clickbait, but she was like crying to her parents saying how she just wants to essentially upload her consciousness to the cloud and that it's going to be a real thing, that this is like a solution to the challenges of human existence, that that like it's almost saying that our whole human identity or our existence has been wrong in some manner, but there's another option to put your brain in a non-physical place or something like that. And to me, all that is like kind of like a metaphor of something that nature is already doing, that there's an aspect of our minds and our consciousness that are already residing in a non-local library. And like all that has been traditional kind of mystic wisdom or traditional wisdom in some sense, that God knows all things or whatnot. But I would argue that the answer is in recognizing that that already exists and not necessarily finding that you need to do it to a company or through some modulation on Earth, though the possibility will be here. And whether that's right or wrong, I would say it's okay. You could take the ride either way. I don't know that. Um, I think just life itself has so many more possibilities than just this world. And that's part of what this technology is like teaching humanity, that our sense of just physicality is only one possibility. And so, yeah, my ideal would be that we become transcendent through our inherent technology and less on what we're spending money on, and all these things are going to be required to do by governments or social programs or by our own angst. Um, but we'll see. There could be really cool things. I'm sure humans are going to integrate with machines in neat ways, but as to whether or not it'll really solve our problems, like if it'll really help us love despite differences, which I thought that was so great, Allison, at the beginning of your book, that you dedicated it to everybody's learning to love despite differences. I think that that's sort of a technology that we're learning to put onto our minds, like to have a mindset that could love despite differences, challenges. And it's funny, I could almost see Meta making glasses that are like rose-colored glasses that show you something lovable in everything that you're perceiving in the world, or it gives you, some positive feedback of everything that you perceive. And so the technology could be used to train us in that sense. And in that sense, we could use it to go to a golden age, which you also pose in the book, like, is humanity on the brink of a golden age due to these technologies, or are we about to spiral into something really heinous? And I really do think we are on the brink of a golden age, and that's why so much is kind of upset right now because it seems like the status quo doesn't want that. Like if the old world was one at war and hierarchical, sadness or something, those forces seem to be holding on to their domain or some in some ways, um, or they're
Are we all going
maybe
the
that's
same?
an
Are we? Here's an
extrapolation.
interesting question to me. Are we
Mhm.
all going the same direction? Or
Timeline splits, stuff like that. I would say
yeah,
while we're on the Earth, well, I don't know. I
like
mean, if
like
you,
maybe part of the human species is going to the golden age, part of them's going to hell, and maybe there's ranges in between as well, and we're this kind of like split. Because one of the reasons I say that is because it really does feel like people are experiencing two different. If you just look at the way the media streams are,
Mhm.
the way people are getting their news and stuff, it's like two different realities. And it's like, okay, if it keeps going that way, then it's like there's less and less like what's the word like contact points between the two. Now, someone like me, I'm going to be interested in continuing to try to, understand whoever there is to understand. But for people who aren't, it's almost like they could just go into their own separate universe.
Will, I think you have your next entrepreneurial idea about rose-colored glasses. Um, but yeah, I mean this goes into lots of like religious things too, and like philosophical, spiritual things about like what actually
We're very
is
open to those things here. So if you want to
like
go
what
there,
actually is the purpose of being here on Earth. You
yeah.
know, there's a lot of different philosophies on that, obviously, but some people see this place as a purgatory, like a
I'm one
purgatory
of them.
we get to choose, right? Are we
Hmm.
ascending or are we descending into suffering and hell and evil and sin, or are we refining our moral character to a place where we're able to create a sort of heaven on earth for ourselves? And so sometimes I find it just useful to just focus on my own experience here. It's like I can bring myself into a golden age, right? But I don't know if I can like take everyone with me. But like maybe that's not my responsibility,
But also,
right?
even like I'm very much into sovereignty and individuality, and I'm definitely on that side of things. But I do question more and more. In fact, I would say I don't think I can do it myself 100%. I think what's the Beatles song? You get high with a little help from your friends, right? I think it's like having, I don't think I need the whole world, but I might need a few people to like be on the train with me, a community, shall we say.
It definitely doesn't happen alone. I mean, I need God to exist. I didn't make myself, or I don't remember how, or we need each other to reproduce as humans. I mean, I definitely think that.
But I do think that the point of starting with yourself is the right mentality.
Yeah, because then you can also include people in your reality tunnel.
Yeah.
Like in my golden reality, humans are becoming more neutral and they're unconditionally loved no matter what, even past death, which I really think is the technological piece that we need to really discover as our species is that if there is if death exists, then we really are justified in a lot of our killing and fear-based responses to the world. But if it does not exist because consciousness is our primary identity and consciousness cannot be killed in a traditional sense, then I feel like that's a really important piece of technology for us all to kind of extend the golden age where, it's going to be okay in the end. Like even if the end looks like you're not making it out of here alive, but none of us are, so it's almost like a philosophy or a new identity within the human species um, that it truly will be okay. And I think that that's a lot of what the sense making I hope that it's getting to is that how do we really feel safe and natural and open, just like learning all this new information, but getting to a place to truly feel safe in ourself and our experience is what I think a lot of the arguing is about, is just that we that we as a overall don't necessarily feel safe in our environments, and so we attempt to control or fight the forces that make us don't feel safe. But I think what you're saying, Allison, really reclaiming the golden age in ourself is having some philosophy that says I'll be safe no matter what. And that must include what we call like the physical change of death. So that's kind of a whole nother topic, but I think all the AI is going to lend us towards that because it's dealing with the subtle and the electrical and the invisible, and all those are the realms of consciousness. And so it'll be an opportunity to learn about that and hopefully rise it into a new sort of state of identity, which is the other change that is being made here. Is identities are changing in this wonderful purgatory, becoming more divine, hopefully, less away from fear. I always like that kind of more towards love and away from fear, which might be a false dichotomy, kind of like good and evil, but they work within a particular realm of growing, um,
And
being that
you mentioned safety, which I think is a big need for, I mean, it's primary need for every human
huge
being.
need.
And that
Yeah.
was a big, in the COVID era, that was a big thing, right, Allison?
Oh, yeah, totally. And what happens when all of our safety's ripped away from us? We're just in survival mode and we just get so tribal, right? We just
Hmm.
go like right into fight mode. And I think that's what we saw. And in some ways, a lot of time has passed, but there was significant recoil that my book attempts to, just help people process.
I think it really does that well. I really think you, by highlighting everybody's point of view, by trying to like understand your conservative father, but also appreciate your left-leaning aunt and also the rebel inside yourself. And you can see that there's a way to um, try to understand each other and then let each other off the hook from whatever that like I feel like a lot of old memories came up where humans were either afraid of getting murdered or murdering. There's just a lot of we don't know what's in our subconscious, and to me, COVID drug up a lot of that. And as a challenge, but an opportunity to become more resilient. And my approach is, how do I become truly resilient? Well, it's like learning about spirituality, and not just con-spirituality, but true spirituality, just like what is the truth that could allow us to go on this grand adventure, allow us to have this experience? Is it truly just physical, or does it have non-physical aspects that continue on, that will soften the pain of loss and all the inevitable change that is just automatic in this realm? It's tragic for a mother to lose their child. I mean, that's not a happy dream at all. I think that there's a new story that is got to be emerging, just that is somehow non-local and a little bit more transcendental, but not necessarily in the biological modification manner, more in a change of identity from just a localized experience to a more just sense that life goes on and it will be okay, even despite like immense, immense challenges that might arise. Um,
You're bringing up a topic that I want to bookmark for a future episode because I think it's really key right now. So the topic is something like conservative theology or conservative traditional theology versus progressive liberal theology, right?
Allison touches on some of that, but you could write a whole nother two books about that.
And the reason I say that is because it's like we do need some kind of spiritual framework to exist, I think. I mean, just materialism and consumerism is not going to cut it, right? So it seems like you had this dichotomy set up now where it's like you have this very kind of fundamentalist, rigid Christianity or nothing, you know. I'm saying on the political landscape. Obviously, we have our new age people we know and that sort of stuff. But I'm saying on the political landscape, it's like that's all we have. Those are the only options. It seems like there's something new that needs to emerge, and I think it's someone, speaking of social media, someone did actually share a good comment on one of my posts, which I appreciated. And we were talking about what's needed is the integration of science and religion. Like, why are these two things in opposing forces? They should be together. And I think as they come together more, that can be the way forward.
I very much agree with that. I think that that's at the heart of a lot of what we're talking about, or at least at the medicine of it. Or yeah, Allison, you mentioned that the medicine in the rubble. What's the medicine in the rubble that we can pull out of kind of the wake of these challenges? Or that was I think the last line in the book, but um, what came up to me was just a stronger identity, a better identity, or for us individually and maybe collectively, that is just the most deeply resilient that we're able to imagine. Um, which to me that kind of looks like feeling so aware of that consciousness is not just limited to a material form, that when we're asked to lay down our life or whatever at the moment we're supposed to go, we can just do that like with great peace, like, thank you, okay, it's my time. Even if it's like COVID's coming to take me out, you're like, okay, it's my time. I guess I'll go with peace, you know. Um, that's just one way I imagine it, but
How do you
yeah,
imagine it, Allison?
Ooh. Um,
Medicine in the rubble.
yeah, like I actually think my medicine in the whole scenario and in writing the book is like the ability to love despite differences, right? That was like
Beautiful.
that traumatized, collective traumatizing experience we went through helped me overcome my own tendencies to make enemies out of those who think differently. So to me that was it. That was my spiritual evolution that happened from that immense challenge. And yeah, that's kind of the spiritual path. It's like we create medicine from our hardships.
And how do you recommend, what do you recommend for other people? Because I'm hearing from people that they're not talking to their parents because they have different political views. Children, brothers and sisters aren't talking to each other. Families aren't getting together for holidays. It's pretty bad out there for a lot of people. What do you recommend for people generally that are where, are in those places right now?
Yeah, I mean, if you're the one being ostracized, that's one thing. But you're the one if you're listening and you are ostracizing, I think that really looking at how the media is manipulating so much of our perceptions through propaganda can help people release their almost like obsession with the point of view. It's because like once you start to decode actually the level of manipulation that's happening politically during this time and like through these technologies that we've been speaking of, you can like loosen your grip because like giving your consciousness away to it, to these memes I talk about in the book, is like a it's not worth like losing your daughter or your son, in my opinion. Even though I know like people feel very passionate about certain things, like I will not tolerate like racism, I will not tolerate sexism, I will not tolerate these things that like we do want to evolve out of in our society. And there's more nuance than sometimes the black and white thinking makes us interpret other people as good or bad.
And also, I agree with all that. And I would just add to that, the way to evolve out of racism or sexism or any of these other isms is probably by talking to the people that you think have these isms, right? And having conversations with them. It seems like that's because if you just, ostracize people and block them, and then they're still going to have the same views, right? So I also understand that not everybody wants to talk to you, but if people are willing to, and most people are, I feel like most people are willing to have conversations. Um, so yeah, I think it's really the opposite. It's actually engaging in conversations. The way I kind of look at it now with people, whether it's friends or people that I know, is like we're in an ongoing conversation. You know what I mean? And it just goes our whole lives. So it's like maybe we're at a particular point where I see it different than you see a certain topic, but we have our whole lives to continue. That's just like a stopping point in the train station, and we just keep having the conversation, and we keep learning from each other. And there's so many things for me that um I've changed my view or my opinion or my perspective, or I've just widened or broadened my perspective. So I think that's really good for people to remember too. It's like the person you're encountering is not a stuck, static thing. They're someone who's on a journey. Just like you've been on a journey.
We're on a journey, guys.
We're on a journey. Okay, Allison, closing thoughts. Closing thoughts, feelings.
Yeah, we started the podcast talking about solutions or maybe talking about solutions, and my first book was like all about solutions and changing the world, and these like this is the way, like do try this and like do this, and then as I've gotten older I realize everything is more complex than I ever realized, and maybe my solutions aren't even good, and like probably I should stop trying to get everyone to mass adopt them. So this book, Will, I'm curious too, like how you read it. I was like, I really just want this book to be descriptive and less like prescriptive around, hey, like it's way easier to like talk about problems than it is solutions, because the problems are obvious and the solutions take some creativity, but there also is something to be said too just about creating a scene history of a period in time that we endured. And maybe the like some people resonate with the neutrality of the book and other people don't. The neutrality was like highly intentional though for me. So it's interesting because in my personal life, like a solution that I have found to my own suffering, like is neutrality. Like is this sense of like divine neutrality to what's unfolding, and like almost like being in the world but not of it in these ways. So yeah, I just wanted to end by saying that personally, like I don't have so many solutions to these giant global challenges that we're facing, and I see that the whole evolution of our civilization is created by people like creating solutions for them. But for this particular project, it's just a snapshot of a moment in time and the conflicts that we like continue to navigate.
Yeah, a couple reflections on that. So I think to me, like one of the things we need the most is like good journalism, right? Which I think most people agree we've kind of lost. Um, and journalism at its core is just someone documenting what's happening. So I think that's like the starting point is like if I can get a sense of what's happening in an honest way, then I can most likely make a good decision based on accurate information. But I think what's frustrating for so many people is we don't feel like we're getting accurate information. So then we can't make good decisions. So I think what you're doing is actually like, to me, it's like journalism. It's like you're just like the neutrality is like, here's what's happening. I'm going to tell you in as honest way as I can amidst so much, dishonesty and people trying to manipulate us in different ways. So I think that's a great service. Um, and the other thing I was going to say is, um, it was something about like we have these differences and we have these, and I think there's this idea that we're going to get to a point where everyone's going to think the same and it's going to be great. And I think that's first of all a dangerous idea and not the proper way to look at it. I think it's fine that people have different perspectives. And actually, I think what it is, it's like the proper way to look at it. This is really helpful for me, and I think a lot of people don't have this view, which is not helpful for them, which is to look at it as developmental levels of consciousness. Like we're all like a 3-year old is not supposed to act like a 25-year old. A 10-year-old is not supposed to act like a 40-year-old. And so people are at different developmental levels of consciousness, and just I think it's just accepting that. And if someone's where you used to be, then support them and help them to help them along if you can. And if someone's where you want to go, then ask for help, right? Um, and if someone has a different perspective than you don't have to try to kill them or, you know, uh, you know, slander their name. It's okay. You know, a lot of things. I mean, there's some things that are not okay, but most perspectives and opinions, um, I think, are part of this human experience. Will, your final thoughts? Mm.
Um, well, I really believe we're witnessing a transformation in identity, human identity, and I think that you addressed a lot of that really well in the book, Allison. And like I said, I thought it was awesome, and I'm glad to have it as a sort of a memoir or a just a reference point back to that moment in time because there was a lot of stuff that came up kind of all at the same moment in 2020. That was a little bit of like, whoa, it's just like wave after wave of social, cultural kind of disruptors. So it's helpful for me in terms of my personal processing to have just go back through the all the different individual issues you brought up through it and be able to kind of check in how I feel about them. So I'm really grateful for it. Thank you for writing it, and Brian, thank you for being a peacemaker, somebody who's trying to see past opposites, and just grateful to connect with y'all and learn together. And yeah, it's wonderful.
Gratitude and love to both of you. Thanks for
Mm.
sharing the journey. The book is called Social Contagion, Viral Ideology and the Culture War for America's Future. Thanks, Allison. Thanks,
Thank you
Will.
guys. I appreciate you both so much.
Likewise, see y'all soon.